This is the 2024 Honda Rebel T DCT. You know, when I found out that Honda was going to be sending me this 1100T Rebel to ride, test, and review, I was a little apprehensive because I had a chance to sit on one of these at Southern Honda Power Sports out in Tennessee when I was out there to pick up my Honda Goldwing. And I was a little bit concerned that this bike might be a little small for me, which it probably is, but that doesn't mean it's not a great motorcycle. There's a lot to like about this Rebel 1100T, and we're going to talk about it. First of all, I have to be honest, when I first saw the new design of the Rebel lineup, and they do make 3 different versions of the Rebel. They make a 300, a 500, and an 1100. And the 1100 comes in the T model like this, which is the touring model, and they also make a model that is more of a naked bike, doesn't have any of that stuff on it. But when I first saw the design of this new Rebel lineup, I wasn't a big fan. I don't know, for some reason it looked kind of strange to me. But the more I'm around the bike, the more I look at it, the more I think it's kind of cool looking, and I think it's going to be, if it's not already, super popular. So for 2024, Honda offers the Rebel 1100T in 2 different colors. This matte armored green metallic, and they also make it in a metallic black. Now, even though I'm not a huge fan of matte paint finishes, I know they're really popular, especially with the younger riders. And even some of the Mercedes, BMWs, new cars coming out have this matte finish. I think this particular color is going to be a love or hate thing. You either love it or you hate it. I kind of like the green. I think it's cool looking. When I was at Southern Honda Power Sports, we were looking at some of the bikes with this color on it, and half the people loved it and half the people couldn't stand it, but I kind of like the color. I'm just, like I say, not a big fan of matte finishes. This blacked out all steel frame, I think, and the blacked out muffler, the blacked out cast aluminum wheels, blacked out front fork, everything's pretty much blacked out. There's not a lot of chrome on this bike other than maybe the axle nuts, and it looks really good on this bike. I like the blacked out look. Another thing that Honda did that was really unique is this seamless gas tank. You don't have that pinch weld flange underneath the underside of the tank here visible like you would on a lot of motorcycles or most motorcycles. It's just a very smooth, clean design. They really spent some time on that. And another thing I like is not only does it have an all steel frame, but all steel front fenders and rear fenders. Now let's talk about the fairing. I really like the looks of the fairing. I think it fits the look of the bike really well, and the fairing itself does do a pretty good job of keeping the wind off your lower body and your hands. If it were my bike, I would definitely be replacing this little 3 or 4 inch windshield with a taller windshield, because if you're going to spend any time at all on this motorcycle on the highway, this windshield just isn't going to cut it. Now the saddlebags are pretty roomy. The left saddlebag holds more than the right saddlebag because the muffler kind of takes up some of the space at the bottom of the right saddlebag. And these saddlebags do lock with a key, but the only caveat is they're a little tough to close. There's really a stiff mechanism to get that latch to shut. You have to make sure you've got it closed. The only place I see on the bike that I think the design kind of missed the mark was on this rear subframe that holds the saddlebags on. To me, it just doesn't look, it doesn't have a really nice finished look. It looks kind of clunky. I don't know. I think they could have done a better job with that subframe that holds the saddlebags in place. This Rebel 1100T is powered by this 1100cc, actually is 1083cc, parallel twin, single overhead cam with 4 valves per cylinder. This is the same engine that you'll find in the Africa Twin. And trust me, it's got more than enough power for this size motorcycle. This engine produces 81 horsepower at 7,000 RPM and 67.9 foot-pounds of torque at 5,000 RPM. Now, you won't find those numbers on the Honda website. That comes from Cycle World, who put it on their dynamometer, so I'm using their numbers. Well, it's been about a week since I have ridden this bike. I'm just leaving my neighborhood, and it is a cramped position for a guy my size. So it's not completely uncomfortable, even though the seat is rather hard and stiff. It is possible that the seat will soften up after time. Now currently I'm riding in standard ride mode. This motorcycle has 4 different ride modes. I think it has a rain, a sport, and then a user definable ride mode. So today I'm just going to ride the motorcycle around town a little bit, give you some of my impressions on the ride. And just riding through my neighborhood. The streets are in pretty good shape here. As I get out on one of my other boulevards, there are some potholes and some dips, and it'll be a little bit better test of how this Rebel 1100T soaks up the bumps. The steering is very light, and it's much more nimble than I was expecting it to be, because it has a pretty fat rear tire and a pretty fat front tire, but that doesn't seem to keep it from being very easy to change direction. Just a little bit of pressure on the handlebars and it will change direction pretty easily. So even though the suspension is what I would call firm, I don't think it's uncomfortably firm. It certainly probably helps with the handling characteristics of the bike. And even in standard mode, it's got some pretty decent acceleration. We're going to put that to the test here in a little bit. These various ride modes actually affect 4 different characteristics of the motorcycle. The first is power. The second is torque. The third is engine braking. And the fourth being what they call DCT, or the shift points, the points in the RPM range where the motorcycle shifts gears. And standard mode is pretty much your, like on a Goldwing we call it tour mode. It's kind of your standard fallback mode that's pretty good for most, everyday driving or everyday riding. Okay, so we're going to use the little mode button over here, and we're going to switch. Let's see, I have to go up. I want to switch over to sport mode. There we go. Okay, there's sport mode, and this puts the power level all the way to the top. Torque is all the way at low. Engine braking is at the midway point, and the DCT shift points are all the way to high, which should be the most aggressive should let you get the highest RPM before the bike shifts. So let's take it out and see what sport mode feels like. And of course, in user mode, you can program these different levels to be whatever you want them to be for your style of riding. Okay. Do a little acceleration test. And it's got power. It's got plenty of power. The Rebel 1100T, as it sits right here, sells for about $11,349. And you might be able to tack on some destination charges and setup fees to that. Depends on your dealership. But it's a really affordable motorcycle for what you're getting. You're getting a lot of bike for that money. The Rebel 1100T has a wheelbase of 58.9 inches, a seat height of only 27.5 inches, and it's 41 inches from the ground to the handlebars. Now the seat to the foot pegs is only 23 inches. I know there's going to be people upset that this motorcycle only holds 3.6 gallons of fuel. But when I filled up the other day, the computer said that I was going to have about 184 miles of range. And I think that's more than reasonable on a cruiser motorcycle. I think after 184 miles, you're going to be ready to get off this bike and stretch your legs, because this seat is pretty firm. So the Rebel 1100T, that T designation stands for touring. And that's because this motorcycle has saddlebags and a fairing and what some might call a windshield. It's pretty small, doesn't really do that much. But don't mistake this for a long distance touring motorcycle that you're going to want to take multiple day trips on. Where this motorcycle really shines and comes into its own are in roads like this one here. Decent asphalt or concrete, smooth, beautiful day, and in that 40 to 55 mile an hour range. This is a true cruiser. This 1100cc engine has plenty of power to take you at any freeway speeds, and the motorcycle is relatively smooth, over 70 miles an hour. But these are the rides that I enjoyed the most on this Rebel 1100T, was riding around town 40 to 55 miles an hour, a little bit of sweeping roads here and there. It just really shines in this type of riding. This would make a great commuter bike. As for the DCT transmission, the shifts were buttery smooth. I rode almost all the time in standard ride mode because I found it did a great job in almost every condition. More aggressive riders are going to want to use sport mode or maybe even shift manually using the paddle shifters. I just didn't feel the need to. I am a huge fan of dual clutch transmissions, and Honda did an excellent job of tuning this one to this specific motorcycle. It was just a real pleasure to ride. My only real complaint with the Rebel 1100T would be the ergonomics for someone that's 6'2" with a 32 to 33 inch inseam. The bike just doesn't fit me. So if you don't fall into that demographic, maybe you're a little bit shorter than I am or your legs aren't quite as long, I think this is going to be an excellent motorcycle, very comfortable for a lot of riders out there. Now behind this case right here is Honda's 6-speed dual clutch transmission. This motorcycle is also available with a 6-speed manual transmission with a slipper clutch. But the dual clutch transmission models are really refined. I found the transmission to be extremely smooth, and I have a DCT on my Honda Goldwing, and I would not trade for it. I love it. It's the second Goldwing I've had with the DCT, and once you ride a DCT, I don't think you'll go back to a manual transmission. You can still shift this motorcycle manually using the paddle shifters on the left-hand control. Now, to soak up the bumps along the road, you've got these 43mm front forks with about 4.8 inches of travel. They do a pretty nice job. Out back, you've got dual Showa shocks with adjustable preload, but only about 3.7 inches of travel. Now, to bring this motorcycle to a stop, up front you've got a single 330mm floating disc brake with a 4-pot caliper and ABS. Out back you've got a 256mm or 10-inch disc with a 1-piston caliper and also ABS brakes. The front tire is a 130/70 18-inch tire on this cast aluminum wheel. And in the back, it's a 180/65 on a 16-inch cast aluminum rim. Now, Honda packs a lot of information into this little speedometer gauge cluster. Of course, you have your digital tach and speedometer, you've got an analog clock, a gear shift indicator, the fuel gauge, and of course your ride mode indicator that tells you if you're in standard, rain, user, or sport mode. I love the fact that they included an ambient temperature, and you also have down at the bottom an odometer, and you can switch that with the mode button to show you various information such as trip meter, average miles per gallon, things such as that. Of course, down here you've got your turn signals, you've got your parking brake indicator, and over here all your other idiot lights such as torque control, gear, cruise control, your oil indicator, ABS brakes, and there's some other items such as engine temperature. If the engine temperature is too high, there's a light for that as well. And of course the mill lamp, the high beams, and a few other pieces of information. Hand controls are very logically laid out. You got your paddle shifters here, and in the front you've got another paddle shifter for your upshifts. And you've got your turn signal, your standard turn signal switch, of course the horn button, which is in a very good location. This is your mode select switch for your drive modes, and some other information on the speedometer cluster. We have the high beams. Down here you can press to flash, a hazard button, and then on the right hand control you've got your start stop button. This is the drive and neutral switch for your DCT transmission. You can also go from manual to DCT automatic. This turns on your cruise control, and then you've got your resume set and resume and deceleration, acceleration here. I found the hand grips to be very comfortable. They are not heated, but it is an option. You can have optional heated hand grips from Honda. The mirrors, I think, are large enough, and at 60 miles an hour, they're very clear. You get up around 70, 75, you'll get a little bit of buzz, but not too bad. And then you've got your blacked out standard handlebars. So all in all, a very nice cockpit for the rider of this Rebel 1100T.
Okay, we're at about 65, 66 miles an hour. I just set the cruise control, and the engine is very smooth at this speed. The biggest deterrent to me is the wind. Not sure if you can hear all that wind, but there's a lot of wind coming up under my helmet. I don't even know if you can hear me right now. The mirrors there's a little bit of vibration in the mirrors, but it's not terrible. I can still see through them fine. There's a little bit of vibration in the foot pegs and a little bit in the hand grips, but I think no more than what you might expect on a motorcycle like this. We'll kick it up to 70. It feels very stable at highway speeds. Okay, we're about 70 miles an hour now. And I think with a different windshield that does a little more wind protection, this motorcycle, yeah, I can see it being a short to medium distance touring bike. all of those vibrations go away at 60 miles an hour. Once you get 65 and above, you start getting that little bit of tingle in the arms and the feet, or the hands and the feet. And like I say, it is a slight amount of vibration. It's not, you got to remember, I'm coming off of a Honda Goldwing, probably the best touring motorcycle in the world, and one of the smoothest, so I'm much more critical than your average rider who rides this class of motorcycle. I think the biggest adjustment for me is the bike sits so low and my legs are so long. I'm used to the Goldwing, and when I come to a stop, I'm expecting my legs to extend farther to reach the ground, and before I know it, my feet are on the ground. That's just a matter of getting used to the bike. But the bike, this Rebel 1100, is not nearly as uncomfortable as it was the first day I rode it. I'm kind of getting used to the seating position and the mid-controls. I mean, yeah, I'd still say the bike is a little low for my tastes. And I think I think companies do make forward controls for this bike, so I think that would help. But obviously I'm able to ride it. I don't know if I could ride this more than 45 minutes to an hour, but I think the bike was probably not designed and built for someone like me.
I mean, Honda did include all LED lighting all around the bike, tail light, headlights, turn signals, everything's LED, and those LED lights do a pretty good job of lighting up the road at night.
Overall, I was pretty impressed with how this Rebel 1100T lights up the road at night. Even the low beam does a pretty good job. It's got a very narrow beam, and you can see the high beam kind of lights up right in the center of the road. It doesn't go off to the sides very much, which means it does not distract oncoming traffic. It just lights up right down the center of the road that you're on. Here are some of the little Easter eggs you'll find on the Rebel 1100T. To unlock the saddlebags, you twist the key and press in on this button, and you'll notice a little red sticker. That's to show you that the saddlebag lid is still open. So let's see just how much we can put in the left saddlebag on this Rebel 1100T. I put in a pair of gloves, my jacket liner, a cap, and I tried to put in my Olympia riding jacket with all the armor installed, and I just could not quite get the lid to latch. So I thought, well, I'll go to plan B. It's important to note that neither saddlebag will hold a helmet, and the capacity of the right saddlebag is less than on the left saddlebag to accommodate for the muffler. Now, without the jacket liner, I was able to get my riding jacket and the gloves to fit in the left saddlebag. And even though the right saddlebag is slightly smaller than the left one, I was able to fit my jacket liner and the cap on the right-hand side. One small criticism of these saddlebags is they are extremely difficult to latch. You have to really mash down on them hard to make sure they're latched. DCT models are always in neutral when the motorcycle's turned off, so Honda gives you a parking brake with a lever near the left-hand control, and there's a small button on the right-hand side to release the parking brake, and when the parking brake's engaged, you'll see a red light on the dash. The seat is very easy to remove. You simply push in on the ignition key and turn it to the right, and the seat will pop up.
So under the seat, you've got this nice little well, pretty large, enough for the owner's manual. There's also a small toolkit here and some little rubber kind of, not really bungee cords, but little straps to hold the tools down so they don't slide around. But there's plenty of room in here for a cell phone and other gear. And underneath this little cap is a USB-C port, protected with a rubber seal.
The Honda website would have you believe that this is a really competent 2-up touring motorcycle. But you better have a really good relationship with your passenger, because that optional passenger seat from Honda that bolts to the rear fender looks like it's about maybe 2 inches thick, so it doesn't look real comfortable. I think these are going to be used for very, very short tours. I don't know if the optional seats shown here from Honda are any more comfortable than the OEM seat, but they sure do look nicer with that little stitched diamond pattern, and I really do like the brown. I think that would really look good on this green motorcycle. Honda also offers a tall windshield option, but it doesn't look that tall to me. I think you might end up going to the aftermarket to find something taller. Now it's time for me to give you my personal ratings based on a few hundred miles of riding the Rebel 1100T. As for styling, I'm going to give the Rebel a 4.5 out of 5. It certainly was not love at first sight for me, but the more I look at this bike, the more I like the overall look, and the bike definitely has a cool factor. When it comes to performance, I think the bike gets a 5 out of 5. This 1100cc engine mated to the DCT is what makes this bike what it is.
Now, if we're going to do a little roll-on from 40 miles an hour right now,
I'm sure there are more powerful cruisers out there in this class, but I bet you'd be hard-pressed to find one that's going to give you as much joy when you open the throttle. For a cruiser with 28 degrees of rake, I thought the Rebel handled very well, so I'm going to give the bike a 4 out of 5 for handling. As for comfort, take my rating with a grain of salt because of my height. I can only give the Rebel a 3 out of 5. The seat is too stiff and the windshield too low for a touring bike. Shorter riders, however, will definitely give this bike higher marks for comfort. I would give the Rebel 1100 a maintenance score of 4 out of 5. Oil and filter changes, even on a DCT with 2 drain plugs and 2 filters, should be within the capabilities of most owners. In fact, I'm going to be making an oil and filter change video for the 1100T, so make sure you're subscribed to my channel and have notifications turned on. Even though the fuel tank has to be moved out of the way to access the airbox, most users can probably do their own air filter changes. When it comes to value, what you get for what you spend, the Rebel 1100T is a solid 5 out of 5. This is a lot of motorcycle for just over $11,000. And how much do I personally like this motorcycle? Well, I'm going to rate the 1100T a 4 out of 5. The more I ride this bike, the more I like it. I just wish I had shorter legs so I could enjoy it even more. So if you're in the market for a cruiser with more power than you're probably ever going to need, and one that gets a lot of looks and comments when you park it at your favorite hangout, this might just be the bike for you. Hey, thanks for joining me to watch this video. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and please give this video a thumbs up. That really will help my YouTube channel, and it lets these manufacturers know that we want more Cruiseman's motorcycle reviews. Thanks again, and remember what I always say, ride often, but ride safe.